Hi, everyone. Welcome to another amazing topic of conversations. I want to thank my sponsors, the Health Channel. So please sign up for anything related to health, to their newsletter, and to Alexa's Workspace. If you need any physical space to work in, whether it's 1 hour, 1 month, or 1 year, Alexa's Workspace will totally help you with that. And Merle, thank you. Thank you for being with us today.
I'm thrilled to be here, Gladys.
So today's topic of conversation is actually legacy. And I've known that you've dedicated yourself to creating a legacy. But before we even talk on how you got there, in your opinion, let's define what legacy is.
To me, legacy is how we live our life becomes our legacy. So whether we do anything specific or not, people are going to watch us. We set the example, and that becomes our legacy. So if one just lives a life of service, a life of love and giving, then when that person is gone, that's what's going to be remembered. So one doesn't have to do anything, write anything, leave anything specific in order to leave our legacy. And a long time ago, just as an example of that, a friend of mine was dying, and I was sitting with her and talking to her and said, Marie, how do you want us to remember you? Because there were several of us together. And she looked at me and she thought for a few minutes and she said, you know, Merle, it doesn't matter how I want you to remember me. You're going to remember me the way you want to remember me, which immediately made me realize that unless we are living our life in the way we want to be remembered, we won't be remembered that way. So it's really important. We set the example for others. People watch us and learn from how we're actually living our lives.
Well, it's actually living by example.
Right, exactly.
It's living by teaching also by example.
Right. Not what we say, but what we do.
But what we do, correct. And I remember there was this professor who unfortunately passed away unexpectedly very young. And I went to the service and I heard all his students talk about the way he impacted their lives.
Yep.
And the way that he showed them the path to a new career. And that's when I learned what legacy was about. On really how you can impact someone's life by living and by teaching by example.
Absolutely. I started out my career as a teacher, and so I taught third grade. And I would say about 10 years ago on Facebook, someone sent me a message and said, are you Merle R Saferstein? I can only imagine that you must be, because I can't imagine anyone else having the same name. And she said, if you are, you were my third grade teacher in 1969. And she said, so I wrote back and said, yes, that's who it's me. And she said, my love of reading came from the fact that you used to take us outside in spring, because we were in Cleveland, so we couldn't go outside in the wintertime, but take us outside, sit us under a tree and read to us. And she said, that's where I began to love reading. And she came to Florida and we had lunch together, and she took a picture of us and posted it on Facebook. And all of a sudden, I started hearing from all these students who had been in my third grade class all those many years ago. You know, as a teacher, we know that we're teaching, we're passing along, but we have no idea, in most of life, actually, what kind of impact we make.
Oh, totally.
And often no one tells us that down the road. So for me, it was just such an important thing to understand. And there are lots of different legacies. There are all kinds. It's a legacy of who you are with your family and who you are as a friend, within your community, who you are and the things you might do with a stranger, professionally who you are, leaving a legacy by donating some amount of money so that your name is on a wall. So there are all kinds of different ways that we leave our legacy without even really being aware of it.
You were also telling me that when you are, and we can talk about that for another conversation, which is the book that you're doing. But when you interview older people, their legacy, and it didn't include any money. It was more of something that they taught, how they impacted the life of others. But literally money did not have anything to do with that.
Right. It was actually from a survey that was taken by Allianz Insurance Company that asked baby boomers and their parents, how important is it to leave your assets or to receive your assets? And the parents thought 39% of the parents said it was important to leave money or their, some kind of financial assets. And only 10% of the baby boomers felt it was important to receive them. And then the second question was, how important is it to leave your life lessons, the things that you've learned? And in both cases, 77% said it was important. And in this project that I'm currently involved in, which is called Wisdom of the Century, where we're interviewing people 90 and over, that almost no one has mentioned money as being anything important. I mean, even though some of them have been very successful, that's not where it's at. And when we ask them their life lessons, I don't think there's been a single person who's talked about the importance of the money in their lives.
That's the way they lived.
Right, exactly.
So I'm going to ask you another question, because it was really interesting knowing how the story behind your books and how you ended up writing your books.
Okay, so I'll start with, I have 2 children, and I have been keeping journals since 1974. And at some point, I thought that I should probably leave my journals to my children. So around the year 2000, I started this journey, this inner journey of what to do with my journals. Should I leave them to my children? Should I not? And at some point, I realized that I really couldn't leave my journals to my children because I wrote them for myself. And there are things in my journals that are really for my eyes only. So what I decided to do was to go back and read my journal. So at the time in 2002, when I made this decision, I had 340 journals that I had filled. And I decided that I was going to go through them and see if there was anything worthwhile in there to pass along to my children. I always wondered, because I hadn't really, there was only one time that I went back and read some of my journals, but I really wasn't sure whether what I was writing was worthwhile to pass along. And so in the year 2000, I embarked on this journey of going through my journals. It took me 14 years. Basically, if one were to imagine my journals as a tapestry, and what I did was I picked subjects. So the subjects were the threads. And I went through, and as I read them, I marked the passages that I thought were worth sharing. And then after I finished going through the journal, I would then take these excerpts and put them under the different topics in my computer. Each journal averaged about 11 hours worth of work. So you can imagine how long.
340 times 11. Oh,
right. And then by the time I finished in 2016, it was really 359 journals. And I was working full time, and I had a family. So it was, sometimes I would be doing this, I would be reading a journal in, certainly whenever I flew anywhere, I always had that project with me. But at any spare moment, I was going through my journals and reading, but it wasn't something that I could really concentrate on until the summer of 2016, and so this was pre-COVID. I decided that at that point, I think I had about 90 journals left to do. And I decided that I was going to stop doing everything that I do in my life, except for the only thing that I wasn't going to do was I was going to still continue to do my Gilda's Club, which is a cancer resource center, and I work with writing with children who have been impacted. I'm with women who have been impacted by cancer. And other than that, besides my morning walk, there was nothing on my calendar. And so for 77 days straight, I was in the house. And in Florida in the summertime, it's okay to be inside because it's so hot outside. And I worked on this project from 9 o'clock in the morning till 11 o'clock at night, aside from taking time out for dinner. And, I thought, who would ever be so crazy to stay in their home and not be with people and whatever? And then when COVID hit, I thought, oh, not so unusual after all, because the whole world ended up doing that.
But you were with yourself.
Right.
You were reviving your story.
Right. So at that point, by the end of October of 2016, I finished taking the excerpts. It then took me 5 years to decide which excerpts to share. Some of the subjects had anywhere from 75 to 450 pages. I mean, it was a really intense project. I chose 11 topics for each of the 2 books that I wrote, the books I called Living and Leaving My Legacy, volumes 1 and 2. And so the topics varied from marriage, parenting, and being a woman, spirituality, friendship, the headline news through the world, Holocaust, because I was a Holocaust educator, death and dying, and legacy. And so it was quite the adventure. And now what's really been interesting for me, so this is really putting my life out there. I decided not to just keep it for my children, but to put it out into the world, which means that I was very vulnerable and had a lot of self-doubt. It's like, why would anyone even be interested in this? So I became really clear on my goals, and my goals were twofold. One was to help encourage people to journal. And the second was to look at my life, not because it was my life, but to look at my life as a mirror into one's own life, so that it would give people the opportunity to look at what resonates for them in their lives, and to think about it. And at the end of each chapter, I have journal prompts so people could write, and I left pages for them to do so. And I also did a reflection at the end of each chapter, because often when I'm facilitating journaling sessions, I'll say to them after they've written for a while, now go back and read what you've written and reflect on it. So each chapter has a reflection of my thoughts after I've read the chapter. And in some cases, because I stopped doing this in 2016, by the time I actually was ready to publish the book, it was many years later. So I had, some of my thoughts had changed, some things had happened on a subject that I could add to it. So the book is pretty comprehensive in that way, and allows some interaction. And in the second volume, I have a whole chapter on legacy, and I talk about how to write an ethical will. I suggest some projects that people can do with children who have lost loved ones, so that there are just different thoughts about legacy that can help people examine their own lives in that respect.
What would you say to the people that, what would be one thing that you would say to the people, the importance of journaling? Because I know that now, and Oprah is doing a huge campaign on journaling. But you've done it for so many years that now I feel like, okay, I'm literally very late in doing it.
So one of the things I say when people say, "Oh, I wish I had
I wish
started
I had
so
started.
lucky," I say it's never too late. It is absolutely never too late, because if you start now, then you've got now for the rest of your life to do that. One of the benefits, the greatest benefit to me, is the self-care. It is the greatest gift I've ever given myself. So journaling is a way of taking care of oneself. It becomes, in some cases, very cathartic. It is a place where I always say there are no rules in journaling except to put the date on an entry. But I also have a rule that for myself and that I encourage people to follow, and that is to not censor my thoughts. Because when I put down what I'm really thinking and feeling, there's a huge release in that. And I think it's really important. And I describe it this way. I say, if your house is cluttered, if you're living in a place that has piles everywhere, your mind is not completely clear. It can't be. I mean, I know when I've got projects going on all over and my dining room table is full, I'm not as clear as when my table is clean and neat and I'm ready to go. At the same time, I think that when we have clutter in our minds, when we have something that's troubling us, to me, being able to put it down on paper makes a huge difference. To the point that I actually at one point said to myself, if you decide that you don't want to write something and you hesitate to put it down on paper, you are going to have to stop journaling. So, I mean, that was pretty drastic because I cannot imagine my life without journaling. But there are days that I say to myself, I cannot believe that I am going to put this on paper, commit it to paper. And I do. But what I also say to people is, if in fact you're afraid someone's going to read it, then don't put it in a journal. Put it on a piece of paper, write it, get rid of it in your mind, get it out of your mind onto paper, and then do a ceremony. Tear it up, burn it, do something, destroy it. It doesn't matter. It only matters that you've gotten rid of it.
You got it out of your system.
Right.
Is there a special time of day when you sit down and write and do your journal?
I prefer journaling in the morning when I first get up. So there's a book called The Artist's Way by Julia Cameron. And one of the things that she suggests is what she calls morning pages. And that's writing 3 morning pages as soon as you get up before you do anything else. And the reason for that is because then you're kind of writing out of your subconscious. You know, it's or your unconscious. You are just, you know, you're getting up and you immediately grab a pen or paper, whatever, and start writing. And so I did that for many, many years, following the 3 pages. And I did it not in journals, but in college-lined notebooks, you know, the spiral-bound notebooks. And when I went back and read them, as opposed to reading my journals, I found that it was much more a stream of consciousness and a deeper writing for the most part than my everyday journaling. But for me, I prefer writing in the morning. There are people who don't go to bed before they write. It just depends. And once in a while, in the middle of the day, if something happens and I'm home, or I used to carry a journal with me everywhere I went. I don't do that anymore because I can always write on my phone if I need to. But I will pick up my journal on occasion or before I go to bed if I just feel like, if I don't do that, then I'm going to wake up. And if I don't, very often I do wake up, and there are times that I write in the middle of the night, like from 2 to 3:30, and then go back to sleep.
Oh, Merle, this is amazing. And thank you so much for enlightening us on the importance of journaling. And I have one last question before we go.
Sure.
I know you told me that you did a journal just for your daughter.
Yes.
The journals that you don't want anyone to see, are you destroying them? Are you burning them?
So in my will, at this point, I have specifically requested that my journals be destroyed when I die. It is not what I want, but I have at this point not figured out anything else to do. I did write to some archives and ask, because I know that some archives are interested in people's journals. And the issue is, so no one said yes to me. One, the National Jewish Archives did say yes. They were very interested, but what they did was they wrote back and said, well, since you started writing in the 70s, send us excerpts about when Nixon was impeached and all kinds of things about the
So it
world.
became political.
And I wrote back and said, my journals are much more of an inner journey than they are out there in the world. And so that didn't happen. And the other thing is, I would not want my journals read until my grandchildren are gone. So the first people I would ever want to read them would be my great-grandchildren, if God willing, I have them someday. But I don't think that that's going to happen.
But if the journals are there, you're not there to tell anyone not to read them. Well, are you going to make sure, unless you give it to a lawyer or someone that will totally keep custody and not read them before your great grandchildren
Right.
are growing up?
Right. So my children know, and I know that my children would never read them. That what I always say to them, and I used to say this to teachers when they would teach, I would teach teachers the importance of journaling. And what I would say is, let the kids write whatever they want to write, but also if there's something they write that they don't want you to read, tell them to just fold the page over. Then it's your responsibility not to read those pages. This was years ago, before legally teachers were bound to read them. And what I would say to them is, and should you decide to read what they've asked you not to read, you have to live with that. You have information that you have to deal with, and good luck. And so I say to my kids, you will not benefit by reading my journals. They don't want to. I mean, they know they grew up with me writing, and I could leave a journal out, no one would read it. The only time
I'm too curious for that.
I know, me too. I don't know that I could do that. The
I
only
don't know
time my
if I would
daughter,
respect, in all honesty, I don't know if I would respect the wishes, having a journal and like finding out, I don't know, getting to know the real you.
I hope they know the real me by how I'm living my life. But there was one time my daughter, when she was much older, confessed to me that she read one journal, and that was because someone had told me something in confidence and said, I don't want you to tell your daughter whatever. And it was something that my daughter had done that I was not happy with, but I couldn't really, I certainly couldn't tell her who told me. And
So she
when
read the journal.
when she went to do something, I said, no, you can't do this because last time you did. And she said, how do you know? And I said, I can't tell you. So then she went back and read my journal, and I don't blame her. I mean, that was fair. She said, I needed to know who I couldn't trust. I'm like, well, that makes a lot of sense. My husband has often said to me, listen, I live with you. That's enough. I don't need to read your
He
journals.
doesn't need to think that.
I do not need to read those journals. But I do, I mean, I feel very safe in that. And as of now, my journals will be destroyed when I die. My hope is that I will go back and be able to read them, not in the crazy way I did before, but just to read from beginning to end, kind of as a life review. I would love to be able to do that someday, and I hope that I will. I do have a friend who's an artist who has mentioned to me that she would love to do some kind of project with my journals. And so she's someone that I would consider possibly giving some of my journals to do a project.
Hearing you speak, I feel that we left out so many years of our lives by not doing that, because we go back and it's like it's blurry.
Right.
We
We
don't
don't remember.
remember. No, we don't remember the details. And my mom's best friend recently passed away, and I spoke with her daughters, and they said their secrets are buried down with them. And they never told any of us their secrets. They shared their secrets,
Right. It's true.
and we were like, we would have loved to.
Right. And that's what happens. But one of the things when I was reading my journals, because I write in the moment, I was right back there and in detail to so
Yeah.
much of my life. It was a huge gift I gave myself. I remember things probably better anyway as a result of my writing.
Well, and that is a really nice lesson and a legacy that you have left everyone. So, Meryl, where can they get your books?
So my books are being sold on Amazon and anywhere that someone wants to buy books. Also on my website, which is merlersaferstein.com. You can order them through that as well.
Perfect. Meryl, thank you so, so much. And everyone, above all, stay safe. And I hope there will be peace soon in this world. Until next week, have an amazing, amazing day.
And thank you.